How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the next episode. What we're going to do on this part of the series is we're going to talk about installing the exhaust pipe. We're also going to talk about the flappers and the recommendation on if you should or should not install the flappers. We're going to talk about what part number you need and some specifics about the exhaust pipe. This part is pretty critical. It could cause serious leaks down here if you don't install this properly. So without further ado, let's talk about it. So first and foremost, this seal needs to be super clean. This entire surface, this mating surface, if you would, has a seal that goes along on the inside. So you want to make sure there's no residual seal left in there. And we talked about that in earlier episodes, so it should be, by now, it should be very clean. All right, let's talk about the part number. You can actually, depending on which year model you have, you can choose between BRP parts. Even though this is a Volvo Penta, they had a partnership in the early 90s. So OMC parts in some models were interchangeable with Volvo Penta. I knew that with this 1994 model, this SX, so I went ahead and just bought the BRP part. Part number for reference is 3852846, and this is kind of what it looks like here. Alright, so that's the part number you're going to need. If you haven't heard me talk about it, this is Pro Marine, part number 23516. It's what amounts to gasket sealing compound. You definitely need to have some of this in your arsenal, because if you don't, you're going to have some major issues. So definitely have that. Alright, so what we're going to do is we'll go ahead and first coat this area with some gasket sealing compound and then apply the seal. Before we do that, some people like to clean out threads. I've heard that before too. These are helicoils because this is an aluminum housing, and if you try to clean out these threads with helicoils installed, you will destroy the helicoils and you'll have to put new ones in there. So for that reason, do not tap these out, because if you do, you'll have to put new helicoils in there. So just keep that in mind for those who like to clean up threads and whatnot. The bolts you're going to be using are the original 1/2-inch bolts. So we'll go ahead and clean those up a little bit and install them. The other piece we need to talk about is going to be the torquing specs. So on the 87 through 89 year models, it has a lot less torque needing to be applied on these compared to the 1990s version. So if you have an OMC in the 1990s, you're going to torque these down to 20 to 25 foot-pounds of torque. 87 through 89, they get a lot less torque, I imagine, because there's probably not helicoils in there. They probably found out, if I'm going to speculate here, that they just threaded aluminum and there's no helicoils in there. So that's why 87 through 89, more than likely, I haven't seen it. You can tell me if it's the case with yours. That's why with 87 through 89, these are only typically 14 foot-pounds of torque, a lot less compared to the 20 to 25 we found on the later models. But if I had to speculate, like I said, I think it's because they have helicoils in the newer ones, and it's a little bit stronger that way. So anyway, let's go ahead and apply some gasket sealing compound around here. We'll go ahead and apply the seal and show you what that looks like. Okay, you can see I've applied the gasket sealing compound along all the edges in there. If it gets all over the inside, don't worry about that. That is the exhaust pipe. So everything in here is going to get a nice little bath the first time you turn it on anyway. So yeah, don't stress about that. If you do get along the edges, feel free to clean that off if you like. Like I said, gasket sealing compound is not the worst thing to have on your boat, but it will keep paint from sticking though. So if that's important to you, be aware of that. Okay, so you can see I've got the seal in place, and it's actually being held up with the gasket sealing compound that's in there right now. But what I like to do is come back and apply another layer on top of it, so it gives it a, if I keep the camera straight here and not make a mess, Allows for a wet on wet connection here, which is ideal. Take your time when you're doing this, because you don't want to have a situation happen where you don't get enough of this on here and then you have leaks, because then you got to take the motor out again. And as much as I'm sure you like working on your OMC or Volvo Penta, you probably don't want to have to take that motor out again for something like a exhaust leak. All right, looks pretty good, right? Let's go ahead and get the exhaust pipe itself in here, and we'll start threading some of these bolts in. Okay, another thing, while it's not necessarily required, I do put some along this edge, even though it's technically not a sealed surface, but I put it on there anyway just for extra precaution. So anyway, let's go ahead and lift this thing up and get it in place. I'll go ahead and set that there for right now and get one of my bolts. Now I am going to coat it with the gasket sealing compound, because much like I do with any kind of bolts that are in an area with water, I do coat them with gasket sealing compound. Not necessarily to lock them in place, but just because they are exposed to water. I can't tell if this is a grade 8 or not. It looks like it's just a stainless bolt because there's no marking on the top. But anyway, I'll go ahead and coat this one as well and get this thing started in. Okay, you can see here it's going in pretty good. Like I said, I put a little bit of gasket sealing compound in there. Make sure we don't have any leaks. So I started one, and the one on the right there, and I made it pretty loose. This way this one sets in pretty good while keeping the seal pretty even. You can see here we still got play. Alright, let's go ahead and install these last two down at the bottom, and we'll start working on torquing these things down. Okay, so since we have all 4 bolts, excuse me, since I have all 4 bolts in here, I'll go ahead and start, probably not like a full grunt on these, but I will start to snug them up a little bit here, just so we get a good preparation for torquing here. Okay, good. Okay. I'm good on that one. What I'd like to do with these is crisscross them. There's only 4, so nothing too crazy. And like I said, for this model, this is your 90s model, you'll torque these down to 20 to 25. I'll get this last one in here. Okay. Let's clean up a little bit of this excess gasket sealing compound. The only reason I do that is this is likely going to get hot, so this helps on the smells that may be coming from the motor when I first turn it on and having me wonder what in the world is making that smell. So anyway, got this cleaned up pretty good, looking good. That is the exhaust pipe. Torqued, seal, gasket compound. Remember, helicoils in there. Don't clean the threads out. Let's talk about the flappers. Volvo came out, I believe sometime in the 90s, and with a bulletin that said don't use the flappers. You can see mine are removed. Every one that I pulled out in every model is either stuck down there in the exhaust piece, causing an exhaust backup. One reason not to have it, and the other thing is they break or they stay closed, which will cause engine failure. So if you're watching this video, take your flappers out and don't put them back in. Don't worry about these holes, because your coupler is going to sit below the holes, keeping it sealed. It'll sit like right about here, so that they won't leak, trust me. So you won't have a need for any kind of flappers. In terms of where you are right now in the project, if you're considering putting the couplers on, don't. Just leave it just like you have here. If you're Concerned stuff will fall in there and you don't want it to get stuck. Put some tape on it. But that's pretty much all you need to do at this point in time. So you've seen we've torqued down the exhaust pipe, transom plate, everything else. This is pretty much where we're going to leave it on this episode. This is going to be specific to your exhaust pipe how-to guide. So hope you liked the video. As always, hit that subscribe button. Leave me some comments if you've got some questions. As always, we'll hit you up on the next episode.